The boy's words that stopped the world. The courtroom froze the instant the black boy said, "You're my mom." No one breathed. Not the bailiff gripping his baton. Not the woman clutching her purse in the second row. Not even Judge Eleanor Hayes, whose polished gavel slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a hollow crack that echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. For a long, suffocating second, time seemed to split in two, one half still in the trial of State versus Malik Carter, the other tumbling headfirst into a truth no one could have prepared for. Malik didn't flinch. His wrists were cuffed, his shirt torn near the collar, but his eyes burned steady, fierce, and unbearably familiar. Eyes Eleanor had seen 1,000 times in the mirror but never recognized until now. The court reporter's fingers froze mid-air above her keyboard. The prosecutor blinked, unsure whether to object or pray. Someone whispered, "Did he just say?" But the words dissolved under the sharp hiss of the judge's microphone as Eleanor's trembling voice broke through. "Mr. Carter," she managed. Her tone clipped, struggling to sound judicial, though her throat felt carved from glass. "That statement is irrelevant to these proceedings. Please refrain from—" "I'm not lying," Malik cut in, his voice deep but cracked with something rawer than defiance. "You're my mother. You gave me away when I was a baby." A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom, one of those sounds that felt like wind rushing out of 1,000 lungs at once. Somewhere, a reporter's camera clicked. The bailiff took a step forward, uncertain whether to silence the boy or protect him. Eleanor felt her pulse hammering against her ribs, faster, harder, louder, until it drowned out the murmurs rising around her. She had handled murderers, drug traffickers, and men who cried on the stand while begging for mercy. But this was different. This was something ancient clawing its way back from the grave of her past. Her mouth opened, but no words came. The gavel lay forgotten at her feet, glinting under the courtroom lights like a fallen crown. "Your Honor," the prosecutor finally stammered, his voice brittle. "The defendant's claim has no—" "Enough," Eleanor snapped. But her voice cracked mid-word. She swallowed hard and forced her tone to flatten. "Court is in recess. 10 minutes. The bailiff stepped forward, guiding Malik back toward his seat, but the boy didn't move. His gaze locked onto hers, unwavering, almost pleading. "You remember me," he said quietly, and those 3 words felt heavier than the marble pillars holding up the courthouse. Eleanor rose so abruptly her chair screeched across the floor. "Recess," she repeated, voice trembling with something between fury and disbelief. Then she turned, robe fluttering behind her like a shadow trying to flee its owner, and vanished through the chamber door. The moment she was gone, the courtroom erupted. Lawyers whispered to reporters. The audience buzzed like a hive struck by lightning, and Malik stood motionless, as though the ground beneath him no longer knew which way was up. Outside, in the judge's private chambers, Eleanor gripped the edge of her desk, her knuckles pale. The walls felt too close, the air too heavy. She stared at her reflection in the glass of a framed certificate. Eleanor M. Hayes, Juris Doctor, Harvard Law School. And for the first time in years, she didn't recognize the woman staring back. He can't be telling the truth, she told herself. He can't. But then came the flash of memory. A hospital room, pale green walls, the scent of antiseptic, and the sound of a newborn's cry fading down a hallway. Her own sobs had filled that room once. 18 years ago, Judge Hayes. A knock came at the door. It was Clara, her clerk, voice trembling. "Ma'am, the media's already outside." "They heard everything. Should I—" Eleanor cut her off. "Clear the hall. No one comes in or out." She turned away, pressing her palms to her temples. Her world had always been built on order. Files, evidence, statutes, truth neatly contained in paragraphs. But the truth wasn't neat. It was a wild, living thing that clawed through lies when you least expected it, and now it had clawed straight into her courtroom. Inside the holding area, Malik sat alone, cuffs biting into his skin. His heart pounded, but not from fear. It was from the strange, burning certainty that the woman behind that bench, the one whose voice cracked when she said enough, was the same woman he'd dreamed of as a child. The woman with trembling hands who had whispered his name once before she disappeared. For years he'd tried to bury the face that haunted his nightmares. But when he saw her today, the way her eyes flickered with recognition the moment she looked at him, he knew. He didn't plan to say it out loud. He never meant to. The words had just erupted, pulled from somewhere deeper than thought, deeper than fear. Now they hung in the air of the courtroom like smoke that refused to clear. Outside, the media vans gathered, their antennas piercing the gray Atlanta sky. Inside, behind the locked door of her chambers, Judge Eleanor Hayes leaned over her desk and whispered to the empty room, her voice breaking for the first time in decades. God, what have I done? And somewhere down the hall, Malik lifted his head, his voice echoing softly through the cold, tiled corridor, not to anyone in particular, but to the world itself. You finally heard me. The past unfolds. The child who vanished, Eleanor, couldn't sleep that night. The echo of the boy's voice, "You're my mom," kept replaying in her head like a haunting refrain that refused to fade. The city outside her window pulsed with life, but her world had gone utterly still. She sat in her study, robe draped loosely over her shoulders, a glass of untouched wine trembling in her hand. The clock on the mantel ticked softly, cruelly steady, marking the seconds between disbelief and truth. 18 years. That's how long she had buried the past. 18 years since she'd promised herself never to look back. But now, in one unthinkable moment, the past had come crashing through the courtroom doors wearing a teenager's face and speaking her own blood. Her husband, Richard, had fallen asleep hours ago, or pretended to. He'd said little since the hearing ended, only muttered, "Handle it quietly," before retreating to the bedroom. The silence between them felt like a canyon impossible to cross. She turned toward the bookshelf, eyes scanning the rows of law journals and case studies. But all she could see was a hospital form, infant Carter, male, relinquished at birth, the paper she had signed at 19 with shaking hands and swollen eyes. Her parents had stood over her, her father's voice cold and final. "You want to be a lawyer, not a mistake. That child will destroy you before you even begin." And she'd believed him. Back then, Eleanor Hayes had been Eleanor Carter, a scholarship student at Wayne State, the pride of a working-class Detroit family obsessed with appearances. When she met Jerome, everything changed. He was tall, magnetic, the kind of man who laughed easily and dreamed big even when the world gave him nothing. He played saxophone in a dive bar downtown and believed music could fix broken things. She had loved him, truly, until love turned into shame. Jerome had been arrested twice for petty theft. Wrong place, wrong friends, wrong color in the wrong neighborhood. And Eleanor's parents had never forgiven her for loving him. When she told them she was pregnant, her father threw Jerome out and told her she could either finish law school or throw her future away. Jerome wanted to run. He begged her to leave with him, saying they could raise the baby together, find a new start. But fear had already gripped her like ice. She remembered that night clearer than anything else. The rain, the fight, the door slamming, the sound of Jerome's car engine disappearing down the street. She never saw him again. 2 months later, she gave birth alone in a charity hospital on the east side. She named the baby Malik, a name Jerome had chosen before he left. It meant king. She held him for 3 days. 3 days of tiny hands clutching her finger, of sleepless nights filled with his soft cries. And then her parents arrived. They took the papers from her trembling hands and told her it was done. A closed adoption, no contact, no record. She remembered the nurse's face, kind but distant, as they carried him away. She tried to memorize the baby's face, but everything blurred through tears. Only one thing stayed clear: the faint crescent-shaped birthmark on his wrist, just like hers. Now, 18 years later, that same crescent had appeared in her courtroom. The next morning, Eleanor sat in her car outside the courthouse, gripping the steering wheel until her knuckles whitened. She couldn't face him again, not yet. Not until she knew whether this was some cruel manipulation or a miracle she didn't deserve. Her clerk, Clara, met her at the entrance. "Judge, the media's going crazy. They've dug up your adoption records, or at least they're trying. You need to make a statement before—" "I'm not saying a word," Eleanor said flatly, walking past her. "Have the court seal everything related to yesterday's hearing. Effective immediately." "Yes, ma'am." "But the boy Malik, he's in holding. His lawyer says he won't speak to anyone else." Eleanor froze mid-step. "He said that?" "Yes, only you." Her chest tightened. She turned sharply, whispering, "Schedule a private conference. No cameras, no press, no one." When Malik entered the small interview room, he looked older than 17, worn down, guarded, eyes too tired for his age. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on his face. Eleanor sat across from him, fingers interlaced, hiding the tremor in her hands. "You made a serious claim yesterday," she began, her voice measured. "If this is a manipulation for leniency, you need to know—" "It's not," he interrupted quietly. "I just needed you to know." "Know what exactly?" He looked up, his stare steady but laced with pain. "That you left me. But I'm still here." The air thickened between them. Her throat burned with words she couldn't speak. "Who told you?" she asked finally. "No one," Malik said. "I saw your picture in a magazine article last month. About your rise from humble roots. You had that mark on your wrist." He nodded toward her hand. "Same as mine." Eleanor's heart plummeted. Her sleeve slipped, revealing the faint crescent on her own skin. The room seemed to spin. "I didn't want to believe it," Malik continued, his voice breaking. "But when I saw you in court, I knew." Outside the glass wall, reporters crowded the hallway. A security guard blocked the view, but flashes still flickered like lightning through the frosted pane. Eleanor leaned forward, her whisper trembling. "If you are who I think you are, then everything I've built, every lie I told myself to survive, it all comes apart." Malik's reply was quiet but sharp as glass. "Maybe that's what needs to happen." And in that moment, Eleanor realized the truth wasn't finished with her yet. It had only just begun its revenge. The intersection of fates, the next few days passed like a fever dream. The courthouse became a battleground of whispers and flashing cameras, reporters circling like vultures waiting for the next drop of scandal. Every headline screamed betrayal, judge's secret past, adoption scandal rocks courtroom, is the judge's son a criminal? Eleanor's face, once a symbol of integrity, now stared back at her from every newspaper rack and TV screen in Atlanta. But beneath the chaos, a quieter storm was brewing, one that had nothing to do with politics or image, and everything to do with the truth. Malik's hearing was postponed pending investigation. He was transferred to the juvenile detention center on the city's south side, where the air reeked of disinfectant and despair. From his small cell window he could see the skyline, sharp, glittering towers of a world that had never wanted him. He didn't ask for a lawyer, didn't speak to the counselor, didn't even eat much. But at night when the guards made their rounds, he'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment he saw her face, the way her voice had cracked, the shock in her eyes. It wasn't the look of a stranger. It was recognition. Yet one thought gnawed at him more than all the rest. If she was really my mother. Why did she give me away to hell? The following afternoon, Malik's public defender, Eddie Lowe, a tired man with thinning hair and a heart far too big for the system he worked in, came to see him. "You stirred up a hornet's nest, kid," he sighed, setting down his file. "Half the city thinks you're lying. The other half wants her fired." Malik didn't respond. Eddie leaned closer. "If you really believe she's your mother, we can push for DNA testing. But that's a storm you can't undo once it starts. Are you sure you want that?" Malik's voice came low, almost a whisper. "I just want to know why." Eddie studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right, I'll file the motion. But you better brace yourself, son. When truth starts leaking, it doesn't stop until it floods everything." Back at her home, Eleanor sat in her dimly lit kitchen, the sound of rain drumming softly against the glass. Richard stood by the doorway, his expression unreadable. "They're demanding a statement," he said coldly. "You're being portrayed as unstable. Maybe you should take a leave of absence until this dies down." "This won't die down," she said quietly. "Not until I face it." Richard's jaw tightened. "Face what? A boy who's manipulating you? Or the guilt you've been nursing for 20 years? Eleanor looked up sharply. "You don't understand." "Oh, I understand," he cut her off. "I understand that everything we've built, our reputation, our name, is crumbling because of a decision you made before I even met you. And now it's my life being dragged into it." His words hit harder than he knew. She wanted to scream that this wasn't about him, that the ghost she'd buried was alive and standing in a jail cell calling her mother. But instead she whispered, "I didn't know he was alive." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" Eleanor hesitated, the memory flashing like lightning in her mind. The nurse's quiet tone the day after she signed the adoption papers. The baby was ill. There were complications. He may not survive. Her parents had told her it was best to move on, that some children weren't meant for this world. She'd believed them. It was easier than I had hoped. Now she realized that maybe, just maybe, that was the first lie of many. Richard's voice broke her trance. So you gave him away and then you convinced yourself he died. How convenient. She turned away, tears stinging her eyes. Get out, Richard, he didn't argue. The door slammed, leaving her alone with the sound of rain and her own unraveling sanity. 2 nights later, Eleanor sat in her car outside the detention center. She hadn't told anyone where she was going. She just knew she had to see him again. When she walked through the security gate, the guard recognized her immediately, his expression flickering between sympathy and judgment. Malik sat at the table in the visitation room, chains loosely binding his wrists. He looked up when she entered, his eyes guarded. You came, he said. More a statement than a question. I needed to, she replied. Sitting across from him, they stared at each other, a lifetime of silence between them. You think I'm lying, he said. I think, she began, then stopped. I think I need proof. But if you are who I think you are, then I owe you everything I never gave. Malik leaned back, eyes dark with hurt. You owe me nothing. You can't pay for 17 years of hell. Her voice trembled. Tell me about it, and so he did. About the foster homes, the nights he slept on concrete floors, the bruises, the hunger. About the people who use kids like him for errands no one wanted traced. About Jerome, the man he'd never met but whose name was on his old case file marked deceased. Your father, Eleanor whispered. How? Malik shrugged. Shot in a liquor store robbery when I was 6. That's what they told me. Eleanor felt the floor tilt beneath her. She remembered Jerome's last words before he left. If you walk away, I'll still come back for both of you. He hadn't. But now his son was sitting right in front of her, alive, angry, and bearing all the weight of 2 people's sins. As she reached across the table, her fingers brushed the edge of Malik's cuffed hand. For a split second, the world fell away in the courtroom, the press, the lies, and all that remained was the quiet pulse of blood that tied them together. Then Malik spoke, voice low and trembling, but sharp enough to pierce her heart. You know what's funny? The same system that saved you destroyed me. Eleanor's breath caught. She looked at him, really looked, and realized something she'd refused to see. This wasn't just about redemption. This was about revenge, and not his, but fate's. And fate, she thought bitterly, never lost a case. The storm, truth versus career. By Monday morning, Atlanta had turned into a theater of scandal. Satellite vans lined the courthouse steps, reporters fought for camera angles, and strangers held signs that read justice for Malik and fire the lying judge. The air felt electric, poisonous, and alive with judgment. Judge Eleanor Hayes, once the pride of the state, had become a headline. Inside her chambers, the blinds were drawn tight. Eleanor sat behind her desk, surrounded by silence so heavy it pressed against her ribs. She hadn't slept in 3 nights. Every knock on her door felt like a gunshot. Clara, her clerk, stepped in hesitantly, holding a manila envelope. Ma'am, the results came in. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for it. She didn't need to open it. She already knew. But knowing and seeing were 2 different worlds. Her eyes scanned the document once, twice. Her breath left her body like air from a punctured lung. Positive match. 99.98%. She pressed the paper to her chest, her vision blurring. 18 years of denial shattered in a single line of ink. God help me, she whispered. Clara lingered near the door. What are you going to do? Eleanor wiped her eyes, her voice shaking but controlled. What would any mother do? What I should have done years ago. She stood, straightened her jacket, and walked toward the mirror on the wall. The woman staring back wasn't the composed judge the world knew. She looked raw, fragile, and human, but before she could act, the intercom buzzed. Judge Hayes? The court administrator's voice crackled. You're needed in the conference hall immediately. Judicial Council meeting. It's urgent. Her blood ran cold. The room was already filled when she arrived. Stern faces, cold eyes, and the faint rustle of papers that always preceded punishment. At the head sat Chief Justice Miller, a man who had once called her his protege. Now he didn't even meet her gaze. Judge Hayes, he began, tone clipped. Due to recent revelations and confirmed DNA evidence linking you to the defendant in State v. Carter, you are hereby suspended pending full investigation. I understand, Eleanor said quietly. No, Miller continued, his voice rising, I don't think you do. You failed to disclose a conflict of interest, concealed a past adoption, and allowed your personal history to contaminate judicial integrity. The governor is demanding a formal resignation. The words cut through her like knives. She had spent her entire life building this, climbing from poverty, surviving humiliation, silencing every whisper of weakness. And now it is all gone. She straightened, refusing to break in front of them. I will cooperate fully, she said, voice trembling but firm. But I will not resign until the boy's case is closed. Miller's glare hardened. You no longer have authority to decide that. For a heartbeat, silence hung between them. Then Eleanor smiled, faint and defiant. Then I'll fight for him as his mother. That evening, Malik sat in his cell when the door opened and his counselor, Ms. Robbins, stepped inside. You've got a visitor, she said softly. Off the record. Eleanor entered, wearing no robe, no badge, only a long coat and eyes that carried the weight of 2 decades. Malik stood slowly, unsure whether to be angry or relieved. You lost your job, he said. I lost everything, she replied. Except the truth. He looked away. So what now? You walk away again? Her voice cracked. Not this time. She handed him a folder. Inside were photos. Grainy copies of police evidence reports. Your case, she said. There's something wrong here. I reviewed the transcripts last night. The surveillance footage from the store was time-stamped 3 minutes after you were already detained. Malik frowned. So they knew I was innocent? They framed you, she whispered. Someone did. Malik stared at the papers, his pulse quickening. Why? Eleanor hesitated. Because you were supposed to disappear quietly. A foster kid with no one to fight for him. No one noticed. Her words landed like thunder. Malik's voice rose, trembling with rage. You're telling me this was planned? I'm telling you, she said, stepping closer. Someone wanted this buried, and now that you're connected to me, they'll do anything to keep it that way. Outside the small window, lightning flashed, cutting through the storm-dark sky. Who? He demanded. Before she could answer, the door burst open. 2 guards entered, tense. Judge Hayes, you need to leave, one said sharply. There's been an incident downtown. Your home was vandalized. The press is saying it was a protest, but... Eleanor froze. But what? The guard hesitated. Your husband's been taken to the hospital. Her heart stopped. She turned back to Malik, panic flooding her chest. I have to go. He nodded, his jaw tight, eyes suddenly softer. Go, but come back. She wanted to promise she would. Instead, she just whispered, I will. As she hurried out, Malik watched her disappear through the steel door, and for the first time, fear replaced anger. Hours later, Eleanor stood in the emergency room hallway, rain soaking through her coat. Richard lay unconscious, bruised but alive. The walls hummed with whispers from police officers outside. The lead detective approached her. Looks like a break-in, he said. But it's strange. They didn't take anything. Just smashed photographs. Family ones. Eleanor's gaze drifted to a broken picture frame in his evidence bag. It was their wedding photo. Her smile, Richard's arm around her shoulders. Across the glass, someone had scrawled a single word in red ink. Pay. Her hand trembled as she whispered, This isn't about the scandal. The detective frowned. What do you mean? Eleanor looked past him, her eyes cold with realization. Someone's warning me to stop digging. Back at the detention center, Malik stared at the folder she'd left behind. He flipped through the documents again and again until one name caught his eye. Officer L. Reynolds, the arresting officer. A chill ran through him. That name, he knew it. Reynolds had been his foster father once. He sat back, heart pounding, whispering to himself, What the hell is happening? Outside, thunder rolled across the city, shaking the walls. And somewhere deep inside both their lives, the storm finally began to break. Revelation and reckoning, the storm didn't stop for 3 days. It rolled over Atlanta like a living thing, swallowing sunlight, rumbling against glass towers and drowning the city in relentless gray. By the time it cleared, nothing in Eleanor's world was the same. Her house was sealed off with police tape, Her husband remained in guarded recovery, and the press now spoke her name with the same venom they reserved for fallen idols. But Eleanor wasn't thinking about her career anymore. She was thinking about truth, the kind that didn't care about titles or respect, the kind that destroyed you before setting you free. She stood in her living room, glass shards crunching under her shoes, the smell of rain still in the air. On the floor lay the broken picture frame with the word pay scrawled in red ink. It wasn't random. It was a message, a warning from someone who wanted her silent. Her phone vibrated. It was Clara. Eleanor, she corrected herself. Something's wrong with the case files. The original footage from the store robbery just vanished from the evidence database. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Vanished? Deleted. And get this, the backup drive from the precinct was wiped too. But I found something in the metadata before it was erased. The file was accessed last week by someone named L. Reynolds. The name froze her where she stood. Clara, she whispered, pull everything you can on him now. Meanwhile, inside the detention center, Malik sat in the common area, staring blankly at a muted television broadcasting news of his own case. Every headline used words like scandal, betrayal, illegitimate. No one mentioned the truth. Then Ms. Robbins, his counselor, appeared beside him. You've got another visitor, she said softly. Eleanor entered moments later, her hair damp from rain, her expression grim but focused. She set a folder on the table. They lied to both of us, she said. Reynolds isn't just the arresting officer. He's been tied to half a dozen juvenile cases that were resolved under suspicious conditions. Kids with no families, easy targets. They disappear into the system, charged for crimes they didn't commit, their records buried before anyone asked questions. Malik frowned. He was my foster father when I was 13. I thought he was supposed to protect us. Her jaw tightened. He was using kids like you for errands, setups, petty thefts, then framing them to keep himself clean. I think the robbery that got you arrested was one of those setups gone wrong. Malik's pulse raced. You're saying he used me? I'm saying he destroyed you to protect himself. The words hung heavy between them. Eleanor opened the folder, revealing copies of police reports, fingerprints, and grainy screenshots of altered evidence logs. He doctored the video, Malik. He made sure the timestamp showed you at the scene. But the real footage proves you weren't there. Malik's voice trembled. Why would he go that far? She exhaled, lowering her gaze. Because someone paid him to. Malik stared at her, stunned. Who? Before she could answer, her phone buzzed again. Clara's voice came through, shaken. Eleanor. I found something worse. Reynolds was on payroll for a private security firm tied to your husband's hospital foundation. They've been laundering money through foster care contracts, using kids for illegal operations, falsifying charges to erase trails. Eleanor's knees nearly gave out. Richard's foundation? Yes, I'm sorry. She ended the call and leaned against the table, her breath shallow. Malik's eyes widened. Your husband? She shook her head slowly. No. Our nightmare. A flash of memory seared her mind. Richard's late nights, his mysterious phone calls, his cold warnings to let it die quietly. She'd thought it was pride. Now she saw the fear. Malik's voice broke through the silence. He knew I was framed. She looked at him, tears brimming. And he let it happen because it protected him. The room fell still. Outside, thunder rolled again in the distance. Eleanor took his hands in hers, her voice fierce but trembling. Listen to me. They've taken everything from both of us, your life, my name, his truth. But I won't let them win. We fight back. We will end this together. Malik hesitated, the years of pain flickering behind his eyes. Then slowly he nodded. What do we do? Eleanor pulled out a small drive from her coat pocket. Clara recovered fragments of the deleted video, enough to expose them. But we need to present it in court officially. The only way to do that is to reopen your case. They'll bury it before it ever gets that far, he said. Then we make it impossible to bury. The next morning, Eleanor walked into the courthouse lobby, not as a judge, but as a witness. The reporters swarmed instantly, shouting questions, cameras flashing. She didn't flinch. She only said one thing. I'm here to testify. Inside the courtroom, every seat was filled. Richard wasn't there. His lawyers had made sure of that. But the prosecution was. So was the Chief Justice. So was Malik, now standing beside Eddie Lowe, no longer the broken boy from before, but someone reborn through fire. Eleanor took the stand, her voice trembling but steady. She revealed the falsified evidence, the connections between the police, the foundation, and the missing kids. Each word was a blade cutting through years of deceit. The room shifted, shocked murmurs rising like waves. When she finished, the judge presiding over the hearing leaned forward, voice low. "Mrs. Hayes, are you aware that your testimony implicates your husband and could destroy your career permanently?" Eleanor met his gaze, unflinching. "I already lost my career. I won't lose my son, too." Malik looked at her then, really looked, and for the first time he didn't see a stranger. He saw the woman who had finally come back for him. The courtroom fell silent. Then the prosecutor rose, voice sharp. "Your Honor, we request a recess to verify this evidence." The gavel struck. Recess granted, but as Eleanor stood to leave, a commotion erupted near the back doors. A uniformed officer rushed in, whispering urgently to the bailiff. The man's face was drained of color. Mrs. Hayes," he said, approaching her. "We just received word. Officer Reynolds was found dead in his car an hour ago." Gunshot to the head, the courtroom gasped. Eleanor froze. Malik's hands clenched at his sides. Murder, cover-up, silence. The storm wasn't over. It was about to explode. The verdict, redemption in the ruins. The city woke up to the headline no one expected. Corrupt officer dead in suspected cover-up. Judge Hayes testifies against husband. News anchors called it the scandal of the decade. But for Eleanor, it wasn't a story. It was the cost of truth. That morning, the air inside the courthouse felt different, quieter, heavier. Reporters whispered as Eleanor entered through the side door, escorted by federal investigators. Her face was pale, her expression carved from steel. Malik walked beside her, uncuffed for the first time since his arrest. They didn't speak, but their silence said everything. Two people bound not by law or blood anymore, but by survival. The hearing resumed under tight security. On the stand, the prosecutor announced that new evidence had surfaced. A flash drive mailed anonymously to the Department of Justice the night before. Its contents were explosive. Recordings, documents, and bank transfers linking Officer Reynolds directly to the Hayes Foundation for Community Renewal, Richard's charity front. The transfers showed payments labeled Community Outreach Logistics, funneled into accounts used to silence whistleblowers and manipulate court cases involving foster youth. Eleanor sat rigid, jaw tight. Every line of that report felt like another knife twist of betrayal. Richard's signature was on half the files. Then the doors opened. Richard Hayes entered, escorted by agents, his once pristine suit wrinkled, his face ghost white. When his eyes met Eleanor's, something hollow passed between them. The look of two people who had once shared dreams and now shared only wreckage. "Dr. Hayes," the judge said, "you are under oath. Did you authorize payments to Officer Reynolds?" Richard hesitated, then spoke softly. "I authorized community grants. I didn't know how he used them." "Liar," Eleanor whispered under her breath, too softly for the court but loud enough for Malik to hear. The prosecutor held up a printed transcript. "We have an audio recording recovered from Reynolds' personal phone. It's between you and him, Dr. Hayes, 3 months before the robbery. You instruct him to clean up the foster file on Carter before the judge reviews it. That file belonged to the defendant, your stepson." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Richard's face turned ashen. He opened his mouth, but no sound came. Eleanor rose from her seat. "You knew he was my son. You knew before I did." He turned toward her, desperation cracking his voice. "I was trying to protect you. If they found out you'd given up a child, your career, everything, it would have destroyed you." Tears welled in her eyes. "And instead you destroyed him." The room fell silent. Richard looked down, defeated. "I thought I was saving us." Eleanor shook her head. "You can't save what you build on lies." The judge ordered a recess as officers led Richard away in handcuffs. Cameras flashed, reporters shouted questions, and Eleanor felt her knees weaken. But Malik's hand found hers. Steady, solid, real. A week later, the courtroom was full again. This time, the case was no longer about scandal or corruption. It was about Malik's freedom. The prosecutor's office dropped all charges against him. The evidence proved that the robbery was orchestrated by Reynolds' network to cover missing funds from the foundation. When the judge announced the verdict, "Case dismissed," Malik Carter is exonerated of all charges, and the courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed to file updates, officers nodded, and Malik just sat still, stunned, tears gathering in his eyes. Eleanor turned to him slowly. "It's over," she whispered. He looked at her, voice barely audible. "No, it's starting." Outside the courthouse, cameras flashed as they stepped into the sunlight together. Reporters shouted questions about corruption, about motherhood, about guilt. Eleanor ignored them all. For the first time in decades, she didn't care what the world thought. Malik stopped near the steps. "What happens now?" She smiled faintly. "Now we heal." Whatever that means. Months passed. The scandal faded from the headlines, replaced by fresher tragedies. Richard was convicted of fraud and obstruction of justice, sentenced to 15 years. The foundation was dissolved. Eleanor never returned to the bench. Instead, she moved quietly into community legal work, defending young people without families, the ones the system swallowed whole. She never sought redemption in the public eye, only in the quiet corners where it mattered. Malik enrolled in a youth mentorship program. The detention scars would never fade, but he found purpose teaching kids like him to draw, write, and believe that pain wasn't the end of the story. One late afternoon, he stood in the community center where he now worked, paint-stained hands guiding a group of restless teens through a mural project. The door opened softly behind him. Eleanor entered holding a weathered guitar case. "You said you liked music," she said. Malik turned, surprise lighting his face. "You remembered?" "I never forgot." She handed him the case. Inside was an old acoustic guitar, the same one she used to play in that Detroit apartment all those years ago. The one she'd sold when her life started over. He strummed it once, the sound rich, trembling, imperfect, human. Then he looked at her and smiled, not as a judge, not as a stranger, but as a son. "You know," he said quietly, "and for a long time I hated you. But I think I get it now." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "You don't have to forgive me." Malik shook his head. "Maybe forgiveness isn't something you give. Maybe it's something you live with." She smiled, wiping her cheeks. "Then let's live it." The kids behind them started to sing, off-key, loud, unafraid. Malik joined in, laughing. Eleanor sat near the window, sunlight painting her face gold. For the first time in years, the world didn't feel like punishment. It felt like the beginning. As the music swelled, she whispered softly, almost to herself. "Sometimes life tears everything apart, just to show you what was real all along." And in that small, sunlit room filled with laughter and second chances, the storm finally passed, leaving behind not perfection, but peace.